souls that are flying around.
Here's the stone I made. Use little whiteout pins to mark our marks we cut with. Table I made.
That's cool. Is that on that, what you say it was? What kind of rock was that?
Pearl.
That black pearl? Is that the table you have?
Yeah, that's the table.
That is the table?
Just a little square.
A librarian where I work once told me that riding Lextran connected her to her community. Surely she had in mind cross-seat chats like this. The 7 runs through the center of the city's gentrification frontier. Like the storied forts at Harrodsburg and Boonesboro, the North Limestone settlements at Luigi Art Court and Al's Bar rank among the first of the city's urban resettlements. On the bus, Joe and I experienced the urban frontier visually. Lots closest to the New Circle hinterlands appear unkempt, the sidewalks crumbling, the commerce low income. Things get cleaner and wealthier as the 7 nears Loudon, and then colorful and landscaped as it crosses 6th and heads into the sparkling central business district. Like a modern-day crevacore, I wonder as to the meaning of these new developments. How did they arise? What are their patterns? I left Smart Braids with a happy daughter and a great appreciation for how the Circle unites diverse parts of my city. But like all roads, New Circle disrupts as much as it connects. In the 50s, this stretch cleaved North Lexington in two. Inside New Circle was the past, a dirty, congested, and increasingly poor old city in need of infrastructure upgrades, but receiving little. Outside New Circle lay a bright new suburban future, a world of Dixie plantations, and this future overflowed with new homes, nearby retail, open parkland, neighborhood schools, nearly all of it subsidized, developed, inhabited, and run by people like me. 2 generations later, occasional visits to Smart Braids aside, New Circle still divides, but the script has flipped. Across the nation, suburban design has lost pace with the sparkling future. Experts now view the burbs as ugly, gas-guzzling, grossly inefficient, and otherwise out of step with our global world. The future, along with development, has returned to the city. If the return to the city has a guru, it is the academic Richard Florida. Florida's 2002 book, The Rise of the Creative Class, argues that an educated creative class of doctors, engineers, software designers, architects, and other professionals hold the key to growth in a post-industrial global economy. These people, according to Florida, require aesthetically urban homes, multicultural neighborhoods, a vibrant music and art scene, good food, a unique regional culture, and kick-ass spaces to play and create. Rather than create jobs, Florida argued that successful cities instead needed to construct bustling urban cores. Build it, the thinking went, and let the arriving creatives deliver those new world jobs. For a decade, Florida went around the nation preaching this gospel for $30,000 an appearance. He gave chartable vibrancy scores so cities could measure their livable urban cores against each other. Lexington leaders eagerly embraced the creative class. The interest has been most felt in the Northside, where public, private, and nonprofit money have collaborated to create incubator blocks for attracting the creative class. In the media, the narrative is generally one of uplift. Columnists condemn the violence, poverty, and slumlordism as urban blight, then praise the benefits imported by the newer residents. To paraphrase a former president, on the North Side it has been morning in Lexington. For the record, I am creative class. White, male, PhD, college professor, urban living, craft consuming, and with a general interest in the creative arts. Florida's ideas have made things great for me and my family. Consider that, to better understand my creative class interests, our mayor ordered his entire long-range planning staff to attend Florida's Creative Cities Summit, brought here in 2010 by a few new urban businessmen. Or that our city council used Florida to justify over $600 million in upgrades to Main Street and our authentic horse country. And that private investors had followed the money. All around me, new establishments indulge in local food, music, poetry, and spirits. Overnight, nondescript neighborhoods transformed into crabgrass districts. Surrounding Main Street, we now have the Jefferson Street, Bourbon, and Warehouse districts. Outside of these, old stalwarts Kenwick, Belcourt, East End, Castlewood, and North Limestone neighborhoods wield renewed power. In my neighborhood, community organizers partner with new business to push beautification and art installations. Nonprofit startups focus on neighborhood beautification, block party support, bike infrastructure, affordable housing, domestic abuse, and a variety of other social safety net type organizations. There is one problem. While me and Mom and Joe benefit, many others do not. Over the past decades, as creative cities have upscaled, they have also become more economically and racially homogenous. And many of the new creative-derived jobs have ended up being dead-end service economy gigs. Troubling trends even Florida now cops to. As me and my tribe moved into neighborhoods with $15,000 median incomes, we creatives held an outsized advantage in buying commercial space, renovating homes, and opening new businesses. We tend to be, in aggregate, 12 times more wealthy than our neighbors. And this wealth advantage has increased since the economic crash of 2007, which disproportionately hurt black neighborhoods that were the targets of subprime loan providers. In these preyed-upon communities, our college educations permit us better access to grants. Perhaps sensing all of this, political and media leaders give us more purchase to indulge our individual projects and harebrained ideas. This is to say that it was never creativity that separated creatives from everyone else, but our access to money, jobs, education, and social connections. Boiled down, Florida's thesis is really a local version of 80s era trickle-down economics, repackaged for liberal city dwellers like me.
We thought good fortune was ours to keep, but where do the good times go? Where do the good times go when the dark is near and the feelings low? Do they drift away down another bed? Will they ever come this way again?
Here in Lexington, a decade of creative class development has produced a historic rise in inequality, felt perhaps most drastically in my Northside community. Since 2007, when a small group of investors purchased Al's Bar on 6th Street, nearly a mile of North Limestone commercial frontage has flipped. From 4th Street to a block north of Loudon, only 3 commercial establishments predate 2007. Liquor stores have been replaced by arcade bars, thrift stores by kitsch stores, Central American markets by seafood restaurants. In the residential blocks that radiate from this corridor, homes have quadrupled in value. On Rand Avenue, less than 1 block from Al's, a 2-year span saw prices move from $30,000 to upwards of $170,000. Journalist Tom Eblin described this Rand development as a promising venture with great potential. What Florida and Lexington leaders promote as a creative class urban revival, experts generally describe as gentrification. Neil Smith, grandfather of gentrification studies, defines it as a decades-long process that owes more to developers, government intervention, and bank lending than any individual choices made by creative class consumers. According to Smith, gentrifying neighborhoods must first enter a long period of disinvestment, which pushes real estate values low enough to compete with new suburban development. Then, they must begin to depopulate, mainly hemorrhaging poor people. All this helps a few developers, who are aided by renewed bank lending, to buy large amounts of property at cut-rate prices, rehabilitate them, and then rent or resell to a wealthier set of private consumers, gentrifiers like me, and the new businesses like the donut shop that Joe and I visited this morning. To support these new investments, local media stir consumer demand with a slew of positive stories of revival and uplift. Local government helps too. It corrals public resources to provide new investors and residents with property-enhancing amenities like better crosswalks, improved parks, new local art, and infrastructure for alternative transportation. Smith equates gentrification with the colonial American frontier. As in that olden frontier, gentrification relies upon fort-like developments that cluster together as protection against dangerous native territory. Culturally, both frontiers provide us with a spiritual, often explicitly religious, hope for the future. Max Remyau, a land activist from Miami, puts an explicitly racial component to it. He writes, "Gentrification in the 2000s is the functional equivalent of segregation in the 1950s and 60s. In both instances, rich whites make money off of the backs of poor blacks. The government is used to enforce the geopolitical objectives of the larger white community, who covet the inexpensive and strategically situated black neighborhoods. In segregation," he concludes, "we were forced into one area, and in gentrification, we are forced out of one area." Today's inequality, as it was during Jim Crow, is sustained through euphemism and a resistance to publicly naming the problem. Black neighborhoods become multicultural assets. Poor displacement becomes rejuvenation. Nobody mentions the staggering loss of low-income residents in these rejuvenated multicultural neighborhoods. That from 2000 to 2010, the East End lost 1,250, or 31%, of its black residents. Or that this pattern emerges across the Northside. 20% less blacks in my neighborhood, 17% less in the Jefferson Street tract. Main Street, despite $500 million in investments, losing 32% of its black population. We cannot recognize what we do not name, and we have certainly not wanted to name. In the end, Remyau tells us, gentrification is about control over the land. Traveling the 7, it's hard to miss who now controls the land, and harder still to evade the feeling that what is happening here is an updated process of suburbanization, new Dixie plantations with more sensitive marketing.
All right, that's us.
Hey, y'all take it.
Hey, yeah, you have a good one.
As we disembark for our final after-school stop, I'd like to tell Jo these things, the heritage into which she has been born. But some subjects are difficult to traverse with a 5-year-old.
Raindrops dot the pavement as we head out to the street. Hand in hand to the bus stop with my little Josephine. All roads lead to Mecca and the cross upon the hill. Through the temples of the goddess